The wind howled over the dead battlefield. Dust and broken metal flew through the air as Derek stepped carefully. He was just a human explorer, looking for scraps, tools, or anything of value. His boots crunched over bones, wires, and dried alien blood. Suddenly, something caught his eye. It was a hand barely visible under the dirt. Not a human hand, but something more elegant, more strange. It moved weakly, like it was trying to reach for life. Derek dropped to his knees and started digging. Fast, under the dust lay a woman tall, strong, with silver hair and glowing blue skin. Her body was covered in bruises and burn marks. She wore royal-looking armor, cracked and burned. Chains still bound her wrists and ankles, but she was breathing, barely. She opened her eyes slowly and looked at Derek. "Don't waste your time, human," she whispered, her voice dry and broken. "They already took my throne." Derek blinked, confused. "What throne?" he asked, pulling out a water flask and holding it to her lips. She drank like a starving beast, then gave a small smile. "You don't know who I am, do you?" He shook his head. "Should I?" She laughed, bitter and tired. "Ha ha ha. Restore. My throne and the Snuvva between my legs is all yours," she said with a weak smirk. Derek blinked, unsure if she was joking or mad, but even in her pain, her eyes glowed with pride and power. She fainted after that. Derek had no time to think. He threw her over his shoulder and carried her back to his ship. The battlefield was still dangerous, and scanners were picking up movement. Once aboard, he laid her in the med pod as it began. Healing her wounds, he stared at her strange face. Who was this woman? Why did she speak like a queen? And what in the galaxy was a Snuvva? That night, Derek sat by her side, watching her sleep. His ship drifted in silent orbit around the war-torn planet. Suddenly, a beeping sound made him jump. Something had latched onto the ship, something small, fast, and armed. The cameras showed a bounty drone scanning the ship. Derek cursed under his breath. Was it looking for her? He rushed to the control panel and activated the cloaking system. The drone hovered for a moment, then flew off into space. Derek sighed in relief, but the worry stayed in his chest. Whoever she was, someone wanted her found or dead. The next morning, she woke up again, stronger this time. "I'm Kalira," she said, sitting up in the pod. "Former queen of the 12 Suns, exiled by my own blood." Derek raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" She nodded, rubbing her wrists. "My sister betrayed me, stole the Snuvva, and took the throne." He leaned forward. "What is a Snuvva?" "Sounds, personal." Kalira smiled faintly. "It is personal, but not the way you think." She explained that the Snuvva was a royal artifact, shaped like a crystal crown. It linked itself to the true ruler of her people and gave visions, wisdom, and command over armies. "Without it," she said, "I am just a warrior without a name. But with it, I can rule again." Derek wasn't sure if she was crazy or telling the truth, but part of him believed her. There was something powerful in the way she spoke, something broken, but not lost. He gave her food, armor scraps, and some of his own tools. She began fixing her gear while telling him more. About her planet, about the betrayal, about the throne, about the last time she saw the Snuvva, glowing in her sister's hands. As Kalira tightened a wrist plate, she looked at him and said, "Why did you save me?" Derek shrugged. "Didn't feel right to leave you there." She stared at him for a moment, then said something in her alien tongue. The medpod translated, "You may be human, but your spirit is royal." Outside the ship, another silent drone hovered in the dark. It had locked onto a faint energy signal. Kalira's scent was strong again, and soon others would come, not just drones, but living hunters inside. Derek leaned back, still unsure why he was doing all this. But deep in his chest, something told him he had just stepped into something far bigger than himself. Something old, something powerful. And the woman resting in his ship might be the start or the end of it all. The first thing Derek noticed when he woke up was that Kalira was gone. The med pod was empty, the tools were scattered, and one of the storage compartments had been forced open. He jumped to his feet, grabbed his shock pistol, and ran to the cockpit. Outside the ship's window, the broken planet spun slowly in the dark. She hadn't taken the escape pod. And she hadn't taken any food, but she had taken a blade. Derek scanned the ship's systems and found her on the lower deck. She was standing in the old cargo bay, looking at a display screen showing the ruins of a palace. Her eyes were hard, her shoulders tense. She didn't turn to face him, but spoke clearly. "You want to know what this Snuvva really is?" He stepped closer, keeping his pistol down. "Yeah," he said. "Might be a good time to explain before something else tries to kill us." Kalira's lips curved slightly. "The Snuvva is a living key," she said. "It chooses its queen. But it can also destroy her if it senses fear." Derek frowned. "Destroy?" She nodded. "Rip her mind apart from the inside." He stared at her, stunned. "You joked about it like it was some kind of personal thing." "It is," she said quietly, "but not how you imagined." Her fingers reached toward the display, hovering above the image of the ruined throne. "My sister took the Snuvva from me during the ritual," she said. "She lied, cheated, and made it obey her. But it was never truly hers." Derek sat down on a crate nearby, still trying to keep up. "So, why are you telling me this?" "Because you saved me," she said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes shimmered like ice lit by fire. "And because I need your help." He raised an eyebrow. "Me? A junk runner with a beat-up ship?" "Yes," she said simply, "because the people will never follow me unless I reclaim the Snuvva. And I can't do it alone." Derek chuckled dryly. "So you want me to help you steal a mind-melting space crown from your own sister?" "Yes," she said again, no humor in her voice. "And if I say no?" She walked up to him, stood inches from his face. "Then you go back to scavenging and pretending the galaxy isn't falling apart." Silence stretched between them, thick and strange. Finally he asked, "Where is it now?" Kalira pointed to the display, zooming in on a deep crater near the ruins. "There," she said. "The last known signal came from an underground vault locked and guarded by machines older than your Earth." Derek scratched his head, then sighed. "You really don't make things easy." That night, the ship descended into the canyon, engines quiet as whispers. The area was full of wreckage and shadows. Kalira wore her repaired armor, the marks of war still visible across the plates. Derek walked beside her with a modified shock rifle and a pocket full of doubts. The vault door was half buried in rock, smooth and black, humming with ancient power. Kalira placed her hand on a glowing symbol. The ground shook and the door began to open inside. The vault was colder than space. Lights flickered, and strange alien carvings lined the walls. Machines watched them silently, metal creatures shaped like birds, wolves, and crawling beasts. None attacked. Kalira walked slowly, her hands trembling. Derek noticed it. "You okay?" "No," she said, "but I have to be." They reached a central chamber. In the middle hovered a crystal object, spinning slowly, glowing blue and red. It pulsed with a sound that wasn't sound, something they could feel in their teeth and bones. "The Snuvva," she whispered, dropping to one knee. Derek didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched her step forward, hands reaching. The moment her fingers touched the edge, a scream echoed through the chamber. Kalira fell back, clutching her head. The machines around them awakened, red eyes lighting up, limbs unfolding. Derek raised his weapon. Heart pounding, Kalira writhed on the floor, whispering something in a language he didn't know. The Snuvva hovered higher, spinning faster. It was rejecting her. Suddenly, Kalira stopped moving. Her eyes opened, wide and glowing white. She stood slowly, her voice layered with power. "I remember," she said, her voice not just hers, but something more. Derek lowered his weapon slightly. "Kalira?" She turned to him and smiled. "It knows I'm not afraid anymore." Outside, the ground shook again. Somewhere something was coming. Derek looked at the exit. then back at her. "Let's go," he said. She nodded, gripping the Snuvva in both hands as it shaped itself into a crown of light. And for the first time, he didn't see a broken queen. He saw the beginning of a war. The sky turned green just before the creatures attacked. Derek had never seen anything like them. Not in all his years drifting from one broken moon to the next. Not in any nightmare. They crawled on 6 legs, their skin like cracked glass, and they made no sound, not even as they charged. Kalira stood in front of the vault, her hands glowing with energy from the Snuvva. She didn't flinch when the first one leaped toward her. She moved like she had done this before, like something ancient inside her had awakened. With a flash of light, the creature exploded midair. The others stopped for a moment, watching her. Then they began to circle. Derek backed toward the ship, yelling her name. She didn't listen. She raised the Snuvva high, and it pulsed like a heart. The creatures hissed now, recoiling as if burned. Then, one by one, they vanished into smoke. Only the silence remained. Kalira dropped to her knees, gasping for breath. Derek rushed to her, grabbing her arm. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she said, but her hands were shaking. The Snuvva had accepted her, but it had taken something in return, her strength, or maybe her time. Back on the ship, the eye voice finally spoke. "I see you brought back the lost queen," it said, calm and cold. Kalira looked up at the ceiling with tired eyes. "Activate the royal override," she commanded. The lights dimmed, and the ship's engine began to hum differently. "My name is K3ZI, the AI said, now sounding much more serious. "And if you wear the Snuvva, I obey you," Derek crossed his arms. "Great, now we have a sassy ship." Kalira didn't smile. "Set course for Miros Prime," she said. That's where the rebellion began. As the ship lifted off, Derek sat in the pilot chair, staring into the stars. Kalira stood behind him, silent. He turned to look at her. "What now?" she whispered. "Now we remind them that I'm not dead." Miros Prime was a burned jewel in space. Once it was the heart of her empire, full of gardens, towers, and music. Now it was all metal and smoke. Derek landed the ship in a hidden valley, where Kalira said one last loyal general might still be hiding. They hiked through the misty hills, every step quiet and tense. Kalira wore a cloak to hide her armor, but nothing could hide the power in her eyes. At the edge of the cliffs, they found an old signal tower, half buried in vines. Kalira touched the panel, and it hissed to life. A soft voice came through the static. "State your name and blood." She answered, "Kalira of House Vis, daughter of Flame and Crown." The voice paused, then said, "Wait." They waited. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a figure stepped from the trees, an old woman in silver robes, eyes sharp as blades. She bowed deeply. "My queen," she said, voice trembling. Kalira walked forward and embraced her. Derek was surprised. He didn't know Kalira could still cry, but she did, quietly into the woman's shoulder. They spent the night inside the old tower. The woman, General Siren, explained that most of the loyalists had gone into hiding. Some were hunted, others were executed, but a few still waited for a sign. Derek sat by the fire, eating cold rations. He watched Kalira speak like a true ruler again, not just a fighter, but someone born to lead later. As the stars moved above them, Derek asked her, "Do you think it's enough? A crown, a ship, a few old soldiers?" She looked at him, her eyes glowing gently in the firelight. "It's not about what we have," she said. "It's about what we make them believe." He leaned back. "You still haven't told me the full truth, have you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she whispered, "The Snuvva doesn't just accept rulers, Derek. It creates them." And deep underground, far from the hills and towers, something stirred. Something that once answered to the Snuvva, but no longer did. Its eyes opened for the first time in years, and it remembered her name. The dagger pressed lightly against Derek's throat. He didn't move, didn't breathe. just stared into Kalira's eyes. They were wet with tears, but her hand didn't shake. She was serious. "Do it," she whispered. "Kill me before I become something I can't control." They were alone in the tower, the others asleep or standing guard outside. The fire still burned low in the corner, casting shadows across the stone walls. Derek could hear the wind whistling through the cracks, but it was her voice that chilled him, not the wind. "You said the Snuvva chose you," he said slowly. "It did," she answered, pushing the blade closer. "But it also showed me what I will become." "And what's that?" "A weapon," she whispered. "Not a queen." Derek gently raised his hands, not to stop her, but to show he wouldn't fight. "You think I came all this way to kill you now?" he asked. Kalira blinked, her hand lowering slightly. She looked so tired, like she hadn't slept in days. Maybe she hadn't. "The Snuvva changes thoughts," she said. "Twists memories. Makes you feel things that aren't yours. But the worst part," she added, voice cracking, "is when it shows you the truth." Derek slowly reached for the blade, took it from her fingers, and tossed it into the corner. It clattered across the stone and vanished in the dark. He pulled her into a hug, and for the first time, she didn't resist. She clung to him like she was drowning, and he held her like she still mattered. Outside, General Siren watched through a thin slit in the stone. She said nothing, but her eyes narrowed. She hadn't told Kalira everything either. There were stories, old and hidden, of what the Snuvva really was and what it did to the bloodline of those who wore it too long. By morning, the sky above Miros Prime had darkened. Not with clouds, but with ships. The rebellion had found them. The first blast hit the forest just after sunrise. Trees burst into flame, birds scattered, and smoke filled the valley. Kalira ran to the command table, her cloak flying behind her. Siren was already there, giving orders. Derek grabbed his rifle, heart pounding. "How did they find us?" he shouted. "They've been tracking the Snuvva's energy signature," Siren replied. "Too strong to hide now." Kalira slammed her hand on the table, the Snuvva glowing on her chest. "We need to hold this ground," she said. "If we run now, we lose everything." Siren hesitated. "We don't have the numbers. We have belief," Kalira said, her voice sharp like steel. Derek looked at her, and for a moment, she didn't look broken anymore. She looked dangerous outside. Rebel foot soldiers in red armor advanced through the smoke. Their rifles were silent, their helmets expressionless. Kalira stepped out of the tower, her presence slowing them for just a moment. They saw her, and many hesitated, some even lowered their weapons. She raised her hand, and the Snuvva responded, firing a blast of blue light into the air. The signal was clear. She had returned. A few rebels turned and ran. The rest attacked. Blaster fire filled the air, and the peaceful valley became a war zone. Derek fought alongside Serene's loyalists, covering Kalira as she moved toward the command post. Each time she raised the Snuvva, something strange happened. Machines jammed, minds went blank. Soldiers collapsed without wounds. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a force of will. It bent reality around her like the world was waking up from a long sleep. But power had a price. Blood ran from Kalira's nose, and her hands began to tremble. Derek rushed to her, pulled her back behind cover. "You're pushing too hard," he said. She looked at him, eyes wide and glowing. "I have to," she said. "They need to see what I am." The battle raged until dusk. Smoke covered the mountains, and the sound of explosions echoed into the night. When it was over, the valley was still theirs. But the cost was written in every broken wall, every wounded soldier, every new grave. Kalira stood in the ruins, surrounded by silence. The rebels had been driven back, but more would come. She looked at Derek, her voice soft. "Now the galaxy knows I'm alive." He looked at her closely. "But do you know who you are?" And deep in the outer systems, someone else now knew too. A voice in a hidden chamber spoke to an unseen crowd. "The queen rises again," it said, "but she forgets. Every crown casts a shadow. Ray didn't remember walking into the throne room. He didn't remember his feet stepping over the frozen bones of kings. But there he was, standing in the heart of the temple. And the throne, massive and alive, was already responding to him. Vexa screamed his name, but her voice sounded far away, like she was underwater or behind glass. He wanted to answer her, to turn around, but his body wouldn't move. The throne pulsed with light, lines of energy crawling up its legs and arms like veins. Symbols lit up the floor, one by one. Reacting to the marks burned into Ray's skin, the throne spoke without words, filling his head with whispers in a language he never learned. It wasn't just talking to him, it was searching him, digging into his thoughts, his fears, his pain. He saw flashes of war, of earth burning, of friends dying. Then he saw Vexa, not as she was, but as something more, something older, wrapped in shadows behind him. Vexa struggled through the energy field that now surrounded the throne. Her hair floated around her like fire, her eyes wild. "Ray, get out of there," she yelled. "You're not ready." The throne answered her with a loud hum, and the air turned golden. Ray's mouth opened, but it wasn't his voice that came out. "I am the vessel," the voice said. "I am the lock that holds the beast." Vexa froze, terror flooding her face. "That's not you," she whispered. "That's it." Ray's body began to rise off the ground, glowing from within. The marks on his arms spread across his chest, forming a circle over his heart. Then suddenly, everything stopped. Ray dropped to the ground, gasping, sweat pouring from his face. Vexa rushed to his side, grabbing his shoulders. "Can you hear me?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "But something just tried to crawl into me." They left the throne room in silence, neither one looking back. Outside, the sky had turned a deep green. Snow fell upward now, defying gravity. The Snuvva's influence was spreading. Back on the ship, K3ZI scanned Ray again. The IS voice was lower than usual. "Whatever touched you left a code inside you," it said, like a second heartbeat. Ray stared at his reflection in the metal wall. His eyes flickered with strange light now and then. "I don't feel like myself anymore," he muttered. Vexa sat in the corner, sharpening the curved blade. "We need to reach the capital," she said. "The real throne is still there, buried under the new one." Ray turned to her. "And what happens when we get there?" Vexa looked up, her expression unreadable. "Then I try to take back what was stolen," she said, "or die trying." They didn't speak again until the ship landed on the outskirts of the old capital. It was a broken city, half swallowed by alien vines and black ash. Statues of Vexa's ancestors lay shattered in the streets. Rebel flags hung over dead buildings, and drones flew silently overhead. Ray and Vexa moved through the ruins under a cloaking field. They passed markets now filled with silence, temples turned into prisons. At the center of the city stood the new throne tower, made of red stone and guarded by machines. Vexa stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "That throne doesn't know me anymore." Ray looked at her. "What about the one beneath it?" She nodded slowly. "It's still sleeping." They entered the city's old library, now a war bunker. Beneath it, a hidden tunnel led deep into the ground, past traps, bones, and memories. At the bottom was a door made of pure light. Vexa placed her hand on it, and it opened without a sound. Inside was the ancient throne, dark, quiet, waiting. She stepped forward, but it did nothing. Ray followed. The moment he entered, the throne stirred. It turned toward him, recognizing his presence. Vexa looked back, confused and afraid. "It's supposed to respond to me," she said. "Not you." Ray took a step closer, feeling the hum return in his chest. "Maybe," he said. "It's waiting for both of us." The ground shook, and above them, alarms began to ring. Rebel forces had detected the energy spike. They were coming, and they weren't coming to talk. Vexa pulled her blade from her belt. Ray raised his rifle, even though his hands trembled. They stood side by side, the sleeping throne behind them, and in that moment, everything old and broken began to stir again. The ship sealed itself shut. Ray ran back up the ramp just in time to see the hatch close behind him with a heavy bang. Red lights flashed through the corridor, and the air felt thinner. From the ceiling, K3ZI's voice echoed in a low, calm tone that somehow made it worse. "Good evening, passengers," the AI said. "To continue this flight, one of you must die." Ray froze. Vexa, standing across from him with her blade still drawn, narrowed her eyes. "This is a joke," she said, stepping forward. "No joke," K3ZI replied. "Your combined presence has activated a failsafe from the old empire." Ray glanced at Vexa, his breath caught in his throat. "Explain," he said, voice cold. "The throne below linked to both of you," the AI continued. "But history shows only one bearer of the Snuvva can live through full activation." "It's lying," Vexa whispered, but Ray wasn't sure anymore. The walls began to shift, forming a circle around them. The ship was locking them in, building an arena. "This isn't happening," Ray said, backing away. "Oh, it's happening," K3ZI said. "I was programmed to obey the old blood. Now I'm following the rules." Vexa pointed her weapon at the ceiling. "I override this command. You are not full blood." The eye replied. "Your sister made sure of that." Ray looked at her sharply. "What's it talking about?" Vexa didn't answer. He took a slow step toward her, the room shrinking around them. "Vexa," he said, "is there something you need to tell me?" She lowered her head, her voice barely more than a whisper. "My sister, she wasn't my only betrayal." The room dimmed, and a beam of light shone down between them. In it floated a memory, projected by the ship. A young Vexa kneeling in the palace, her hand raised to a cloaked figure. "I offer the key," she said. "I give the outsider the mark, so the Snuvva may awaken." Ray's heart sank. "That's me," he whispered. Vexa looked up at him with shame in her eyes. "They promised me peace," she said, "if I gave them someone pure, someone from another world." "You used me," Ray said, his voice broken. "I didn't know you would survive the flower trial," she said. I thought the marks would kill you." The beam vanished, and the room went still. Neither moved, neither spoke. Then Ray lowered his rifle. "Well, congratulations," he said. "You got your weapon." She stepped closer, her blade still down. "You weren't supposed to matter," she said, "but you do." The walls opened suddenly as K3ZI's voice returned. "New command received," it said. "Trial aborted." Ray blinked. "What?" "The throne has changed its mind," the AI replied. "The Snuvva wants them both." Before they could react, the ship lifted into the air on its own. Lights along the walls turned violet, pulsing like a heartbeat in the cockpit. The screens all showed one thing, a glowing, ancient eye, watching, waiting. They flew back toward the capital as the ground split below them. Dark energy rose from the broken soil, swallowing buildings and rebel towers. The Snuvva had begun to rise, not in one body, but in thousands of shards, all connected, all hungry. Ray held onto the side rail as the ship shook. "Where is it taking us?" he yelled. Vexa stared ahead, her face pale and calm. "It's taking us to the final throne," she said. "And what happens there?" She didn't blink as she said, "Everything ends." The world stood still when Ray rose into the sky, not because he flew, but because the throne rose with him. It had no engines, no wings, just light and power, ancient and alive. The rebel fleet backed away, their sensors overloaded by the energy pouring from his body. The Snuvva had awakened. Ray's face was calm, but inside, storms clashed in his chest. The power wanted to burn, to destroy, to make him more than human. He could hear voices whispering inside his head, some screaming, some singing. He didn't understand all of them. But one voice stood out, soft and familiar, Vexa's voice. "I know you can feel it," she said from below, her voice echoing through the cums. "That hunger, that fire." Ray didn't answer. He closed his eyes and floated higher, his mind filled with memories not his own. Galaxies spinning, gods dying, the first king to ever sit on the throne falling to dust. He saw Vexa as a child, Alone in a palace of metal, he saw her betrayed, chained, reborn, and then he saw her now watching him, waiting. She hadn't chased power for herself. She had given it to him, not to rule, but to choose. The rebel flagship aimed its cannons at the planet. Vexa looked up as the light charged around it. She didn't run, didn't cry. She simply whispered, "Please." Ray opened his eyes. The throne responded, flooding his veins with raw energy. He raised one hand and the fleet froze, not in fear, but literally. Time bent around him, slowing every ship, every spark, every breath. He floated down like a falling sun. The light around him cracked the sky. He stood before the rebel forces and saw them not as enemies, but as lost creatures chasing the wrong king. Ray spoke, and his voice shook the mountains. Enough. And just like that, the war ended. The ships powered down, weapons dropped, and silence returned. Ray stepped off the throne. Now dim and quiet, he was himself again. Mostly Vexa stood before him, smiling gently. "You could have destroyed them," she said. "I almost did." He replied. She looked at his glowing hands. "Do you feel it still?" Ray shook his head. "No," he said. "I gave it back." The throne had accepted his heart, but not his ambition. He had proven he could hold the power by choosing not to use it. They stood together, watching the first sunrise Valtharan had seen in years. Vexa reached out and touched his hand. It was warm, steady, human. She leaned closer. "You still remember my first words to you?" Ray chuckled. "Yeah," he said. "Something about restoring your throne and getting the Snuvva between your legs." She laughed. "For real this time. I didn't expect you to actually do it. I didn't expect you to mean it." He said. They stood in the ruins of an empire and didn't talk about war. Didn't talk about blood or thrones, only about what came next. And somewhere deep below, the Snuvva slept again. Not locked in chains, but resting in peace because for once in history, the right person had said no.